Brazil who actually rebelled against the Portuguese who was being enslaved by the Portuguese. They rebelled, and within that rebellion, they fled into the mountains. They fled into terrain that from the Portuguese perspective is unlivable. They built an entire kingdom in there, a civilization that lasted for almost a century, from 1600 to like 1695. This is how long it lasted. And every time the Portuguese was attempting to reconquer or take it back, they was unable to do so. Two of the principal kings or leaders there was Zumbi and Zumba. They both were great. Zumba was more of a moderate. Zumbi was straight revolutionary. So you look at that. So Zumba was first, and then Zumbi follows in. But what makes them relevant is the ability to carve out within mountains a civilized settlement where they was able to raise, build children, educate, build a whole society, barter within themselves, build settlements where they begin to trade and have delegates from each section and things of the nature. It was a total operational society that came from what? It came from the creativity of enslaved Africans, primarily from Angola, who were there, who said, bump this, we gone. So when we talk about the Maroons, oftentimes Palmares is left out the conversation, but they're like at the beginning of that Maroon situation, because what they was able to do, they was able to build something where they began to engage in negotiation with the Portuguese. They began to recognize that they were in fact a society, a civilization. And like I said, it lasted for 95 years for the most part. 1600 to 1695. Now Fort Mose is happening around 1733. That's in Florida. Palmares is Brazil in 1600. Fort Mose is in the early 1700s in Florida. So a lot of times people talk about, the Maroons and the Seminoles, and you hear all that talk, stuff like that. Now, what makes Fort Mose interesting is it's a Spanish settlement, a Spanish colony. Because during this time period, it wasn't Florida as we know it, because it was controlled by the Spaniards. It was Spaniards that controlled it. So African people, once again, who were enslaved in Georgia, would escape and run south. So even when you get into, I'm going to digress, bring it together. So even when we start talking about the Underground Railroad, right? The Underground Railroad has been co-opted if you don't get into the true history of it, because the story is always told from the position of us escaping and hitting north. The initial breakage, we went south. North was later on, for the most part. Initially, we went south. We went west. We went north. So those of us who was in Georgia who went south, they went into what is known as the Spanish colonies at the time period. And so Spain would allow them in, wouldn't extradite them or give them back to the English, because Spain and England were rivalries for the most part. And so these Africans who went in was able to build societies. And one such, there was one African, his name right now kind of slipped my mind, but he was so instrumental in building this particular colony, if you will, or settlement. He was actually enslaved in Georgia and escaped from there, ran into what we know as Florida, into the St. Augustine settlement area, and built up Fort Mose. And within it, to this day, right now to this day, they're excavating down there in it. And they're uncovering all type of stuff. They couldn't believe, because once again, where the settlement was at is near marshland. Like marshland and swampland, but they was able to, African people were able to build a society, not only build the society, but actually build a fort around the society about 13 feet high, and then out from the fort, they was able to build where they had the encampment banks, whereas though if you was coming in, you couldn't just come straight into the fort, you would have to come in and try to go across this water pipe, then attack them. So they was looking at that from the military perspective, how it was literally a militarized society. But it's coming from individuals who were once again deemed ignorant, unintelligent, because they were what? Enslaved. So once again, that Kuumba of who we are was able to bring a society into existence. A society that was operational and functional. A society where they had marketplaces, they had statesmen, they had generals, they had admirals, you name it, they had all of this there. And this society or settlement didn't exist prior to those people doing that. What's the relevancy of that today? It shows us what we can build when we focus on us. And everybody get in line. One of the things that trips black people up a lot, we struggle with getting in line with division. We struggle with getting in line with division. And that's because everybody in this society, for the most part, people are trying to be seen. And so because everybody's trying to be seen in some capacity or want their work validated, division is, we struggle with that. That's why we've been longer. And there's so many examples. We can use Mackendall down in Haiti and talk about how they built that. Because they all got in line. They got in line from Mackendall to Bookman to Toussaint to Dessalines to Henry. They just got in line. And because of that, they built the first black empire in the Northern Hemisphere. The first black, they always say the first black republic. The reason they say that, once again, is they want to diminish. And even though republic sound good, but they use republic to diminish what Dessalines did. See, it was an empire, and he outlawed slavery in that empire. And he began to free the enslaved throughout the Caribbean and South America. That's what's left out the dialogue on Dessalines. That's what he was down there doing. He abolished it. And so not only did he threaten the French, not only did he threaten them, the British was threatened because he was attacking all those colonies during that time period. He was sending people to help him fight in those wars in different places. So it's greater than just saying it's a republic. It was an empire. But once again, why was it possible? It was possible because they understood that we all work behind one thing that ultimately benefits all of us. And today we call all of their names. We know Toussaint as well as we know Bookman, as well as we know Mackendall, and we know Dessalines. See, none of them have to say, well, I'm bound to be known, because just do the work and history will hold you dear. That's creativity. Just do the work. History will hold you dear if you do the work the right way. Just don't sully your name while doing the work. That's it. Just do not sully your name. What I mean by that, don't dirty up your name. That's it. Keep a good name. Keep a good word. Keep a good character. Do the work. And watch how you get out of the history. That's all it takes. You don't have to chase for a reputation while you're here. No great leader sought to be a great leader. They became great leaders because something had to be done, and they said, I'll step up to the plate and do it. And then everything else becomes history. You don't chase fame. You don't chase reputation. You don't chase repute. So our creativity is in the walk. Our creativity is in the children. That's cool. It's in the children. Watching the children, seeing the children. When the children is young and the little girl's trying to put the mother's shoes on, the shoes bigger than the whole body, because she's trying to figure out how to walk with the shoes on. That is the creativity. The willingness to try, the willingness to learn. That's our creativity. That's what this is about. It's the black mother that's figuring out how she's going to raise 3 children, but don't have the means to raise 3 children. But figure out how to raise 3 children. Even if that means that I got to recycle some clothes by one child and make sure those clothes go to the next child. And yet pass those clothes on to that other child where they still look clean, nice, and new, that the other child don't even complain that they was handed down. That's the creativity. That's who we are.
Joker, come and sit down. We're not doing that.
So when we looking at these 7 principles, what's oftentimes not mentioned is, and many people don't notice when they talk about Kwanzaa, but the Nguzo Saba is a value system. See, that's kind of left out. The Nguzo Saba is a value system. That's what it was about. But none of those principles, so you got the first principle is what? What's the first one? The last one is Iman. All right? Faith. Think about that arrangement. There is no, like I said the other night, there is no self-determination where there is no unity. There is no self-defining. There is no self-agency. There is none of that. Because none of this is individualized. This is the value system for the people, the group. So the person must first be unified within him or herself. That's where the unity started. Unity in your own mind. Unity within your own being. Because from there, you can proceed to do what? You can proceed to name and define for yourself. You can act within black agency. That's self-determination. And then once you understand internal unity in terms of thought, speech, and behavior, that's the unity. Because so many of us are hypocritical. We think one way, talk another way, and be another way. And we think people don't see the hypocrisy and the inconsistency. And we wonder why people fizzle off or stay away from us and all that, right? Because people see that you are fractured. You're a fractured being. So that's why when you go to Kim and they talk about the Metru Netta and the Metru Nefer, good speech. The good speech is the good thought, the good articulation, and the good behavior. That's Umoja. That's the self-unity. Once that's achieved, self-determination is possible, which is agency. How you speak for yourself, how you articulate your principles. And then from there, you can begin to do what? You can step into the next one, the third one, which is what? Ujima. Ujima stands for what? Collective work and responsibility. I like to phrase it this way: collective work and collective responsibility. Because that's what that's saying. Right? Collective work and collective responsibility. But how can someone be a part of a collective that's internally fractured? Think about that. Realistically. You're not operating as a body with no one else. When you got all this stuff that's going on inside you, you're not. So collective work and collective responsibility follows this first principle, which is unity. It follows that principle. Because after collective responsibility, you arrive at what? Ujama'a. Cooperative economics. Ujama'a. Cooperative economics. And for us, economics is not just about how most people think about it, buying black. That's an aspect. We should do that. We should do that. But you cannot reduce it to that. You can't reduce it to that. You can't reduce economics to money. It's deeper and it's greater than just money. At the heart of what economics is, it's your social system. It's the internal relationships and networks that you are building to foster yourself, your community, and your people. It's those relationships and how those resources are going to be what? Administered, shared, distributed. That's that part there. And then after Ujama, we end up with Neil. And Neil is what? Purpose. No fragmented person has purpose. No person who haven't found an aspect of who they are has purpose. At its highest essence, purpose must always be situated with something larger than yourself. We thrive best when we are living for something bigger and greater than ourselves. We thrive best, right? When it's for self, it burns out at some point. When it's for self. When it's for self, and you keep moving for self, it can disconnect you. It can cause you to prioritize self in anything or whatever that falls in the realm of self. Purpose, at its highest essence, must be situated as within something that's bigger and greater than ourselves. We should live for a higher and a greater cause. I'm going to tell you why I say that, then we're going to transition out this part right here. If our ancestors, those who were enslaved, didn't seek for something bigger and greater, none of us be sitting here today. If they wasn't driven by something for something bigger and greater, we wouldn't be sitting here today. If Nat Turner didn't seek something greater than himself, we wouldn't be here today. If Harriet Tubman didn't seek for something bigger and greater than herself, we wouldn't be here today. So we don't have the luxury not to connect our purpose to something bigger and greater than us, because many have come before us. Look at the brilliance of Malcolm X. If Malcolm totally lived for Malcolm, he may still be here today with his brilliance. If Marcus Garvey only lived for Marcus Garvey, we probably saw Marcus Garvey live into his 90s. And all the rest of them. So we cannot become comfortable with how we understand life, because people who have preceded us, who have lived for something greater than themselves, so that you and I could be here today having the conversation about this particular principle to figure out how we are going to add on to that tradition.